drawing environment here, and kind of show you, give you a brief tour here before we get started drawing stuff for Model Monday here at the Milwaukee Makerspace. So, at the top of our window are all of our tools here. So you can see we've got a whole bunch of tools. Tools are fun. If you're a Makerspace member, this is your favorite area in the window, the tool area. In the top right-hand corner, there is a navigation cube. So you can see as I hover my mouse over the navigation cube, there are lots of things that highlight blue there. The cube there is how we'll navigate our 3D environment around, how we'll twist and turn and rotate our environment around. So anything that highlights blue, I can click on it, and I'll just be looking at that face. Now, there's nothing in my 3D world right now, so it's kind of uneventful. I can come over to my browser over on the left-hand side of the screen, and I can turn on the origin, the little eyeball, visibility eyeball right next to my origin. So that'll give me something at least to look at here. So now as I rotate my environment, if I click and drag on that navigation cube, you can see it twisting and turning around. So you can see something is indeed happening. It's like magic. Two things will happen as we start drawing stuff. So our browser here that I mentioned before will start to become populated with other folders. So in general, we'll start by making two-dimensional sketches. When we make a two-dimensional sketch, we'll have a folder here that says sketches. And in that folder will be all of the sketches that we make. There might be 1 or 2 or 27 or 413. They will be conveniently labeled 1 through 214 until you rename them, which I encourage people to do. As we take those two-dimensional sketches and use our tools at the top, to make those into three-dimensional objects, then we'll have a folder that appears over here called Bodies. The Bodies folder is full of all the three-dimensional shapes that are in our drawing view here. The second thing that happens is Fusion 360 is a parametric design software. So down here is a timeline of things that we have done in order to get to where we're at. Now, this is very boring because we have done nothing. Hence, our timeline is empty. But we're going to start doing stuff right now. The first thing I am going to do to create our dice tower is I'm going to click on the Create menu, and I'm going to choose to create a sketch.
You said you saw 8 terabytes. You said how much was it again?
So I'm going to choose Create Sketch. And something that's really nice about Fusion is tooltips are fantastic. So almost everything that I hover over in Fusion 360 will give me a tooltip. Okay. Some of them have pictures like this. There are 2 paragraphs here. So the first paragraph tells me what this tool does, and the second paragraph tells me how to use the tool. So what this tool does is it enters sketch mode, where I can create geometric profiles that define the foundation of a design. And how to use the tool is you select a construction plane and then create lines, arcs, or points. So let's do that. I'm going to click on Create Sketch. Now if I just stop moving my mouse again, it'll give me another tooltip. It says, oh, I'm supposed to select a plane or a linear face. In order to draw a two-dimensional object in our three-dimensional world, we need kind of an imaginary piece of paper to draw it on. And these 3 yellow squares that I was kind of twisting and turning around earlier, those are my imaginary pieces of paper in the room. So you can kind of imagine that as like the floor and the walls in this room. It'd be difficult for me to make a drawing out here, but it'd be really easy for me to draw right on this wall. And this is a makerspace, so you can draw right on the walls if you want to. I'm just kidding. You should not do that. Please don't draw on the walls. Okay. So if I hover my mouse over those objects, I can just pick one of them. And I'm going to just pick the one in between my red and my green axis. And I would encourage you to do the same. This is our top surface. Now, something, a little pro tip here, if you want to make sure you're clicking on the right surface, I can come over to my navigation cube in the top right-hand corner, and if I just click on the word top, then I'm only seeing one of those squares, and it's really easy for me to not accidentally click on something else. So if I click on that, now it brings me into my sketching environment here. So you'll notice all the tools at the top have changed to two-dimensional sketching tools. And then over in the right-hand side, for me it's on the right-hand side, we've got a window that's open. That is our sketch palette window there.
Okay,
So we are right now what is known as editing a sketch. And you know, here, this is kind of cool. It's already, we've already done a thing. You've successfully done a thing. Thing one, right here. You've made a sketch. It has appeared in our timeline. We'll click on the Create menu one more time, and you'll notice it's changed because we're editing a sketch right now. So all of the things in our Create menu here are now two-dimensional drawing tools. Let's go ahead and choose from the circle window. Let's choose the center diameter circle.
I'm tempted to get one for myself right now.
So if I click on center diameter circle, and now if I don't know what to do, if it's the first time I'm using a tool, if I just not move my mouse, it says, oh, place the center point. All right. So I'm going to click one time to place the center point. So click and release. It's not a click and drag. So I clicked, I released, and now I move my mouse out. And I encourage people that once you're at this point where you can start to see numbers here, now you should let go of your mouse and embrace the power of the keyboard. Yeah.
Okay, mine's coming up in metric. Is there a way to set the default to inch?
Totally. Yes, there is, and you do it in the way that I forget to tell everybody all the time. So in the top right-hand corner in our browser, there's a little document settings. Spin down, we can spin it open by clicking on a little triangle next to it. And if we hover over those units, yours probably say millimeters.
Yes.
Because that is a standard of units that literally the rest of the world uses. But if you're watching this recording in Myanmar or Liberia, you will also want to change your unit type to inches. Unless you're working on a lot of NASA projects. I assume that NASA uses the standard of measurement that the rest of the world uses now, that they crashed a Mars probe and made that error. You only get to crash one Mars probe because you used the wrong measurement system. You only get to pass on that once. Yeah. So we're going to change our unit types to inches. And there's also a little checkbox here. You could say set as default. So I have done that. I tend to think in freedom units. I blame the public school system. All right, so now we can click on Create, Circle, and then Center Diameter Circle here. And I like to have, as a rule of thumb, some part of my sketch connected to the middle of my world here. So this is my origin. I like to have, as a rule of thumb, something connected to there. For reasons that I won't really get into for peeps, those of you who are new, it's just good practice. It'll save you some headaches later. All right, so this is going to be the outer diameter of our dice tower. So I'm going to type in, do we think 4 inches is a good?
Sure.
Let's go with 4 for now. That seems fine. Yeah. So I'm going to type in 4, and then I'm going to hit enter, and that'll place that measurement, and it'll finish that circle there. Now, a dice tower is hollow, so we will want to have a second circle here, because if we were to extrude this now, it would just be a cylinder, and we would not be able to fit our dice inside of it. And then you won't be able to play your game, and then you'll have a bad time. So there are 2 ways that we could make this second circle. So we could come down here to the create menu, we could choose another center diameter circle, and we could place that concentric on the circle that we just made and just make it a little bit bigger. Or another way to do it is with an object in the modify menu. So there's a tool in the modify menu called offset. Because we've already used the circle tool, let's use the offset tool now. So if we come down here to modify and then offset, and if I just stop moving my mouse, does it tell me to do a thing? It does not. But I happen to know that we need to select the sketch curve that we want to offset here. The sketch curve that we want to offset is our circle. And now there's this little blue triangle thing. So now I can specify how thick I want that wall to be. And maybe like 1/8 of an inch is probably plenty for a dice tower. In freedom units, 1/8 of an inch is a round number. This is why people don't like us. Okay. So I'll note that this offset can be a positive or a negative number, and that positive or negative number affects the direction that we're offsetting here. Positives and negatives often confuse me in Fusion 360. So, like sometimes I think positive should always be out on a circle, but it's not necessarily that case. So you gotta kind of try it one way, see if it's moving in the right direction, and then.
It almost seems like it would matter on which direction you chose to start with.
And I think some people think that is the case, but I can't confirm. Yeah. So for me, positive goes out, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to click OK here. Now, I think that I want to say I'm done making this sketch. So in order to finish this sketch, there are two ways that I can do it. I can click on the Finish Sketch button on my sketch palette window, or I can click on the Finish Sketch icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Way up there, there's a little green checkbox. So either that button up there or clicking the Finish Sketch button on my sketch palette will do the job. Now that we are not editing a sketch, you will notice that all of your measurements have gone away, and that is okay. You only see the measurements for your sketches when you're working on the measurements, when you're editing that sketch. So we've got a sketches folder over here in our browser, and I'll spin down the little triangle next to that sketches folder, and we'll see the very appropriately named sketch 1. I would always encourage people to name your sketches, name your bodies. It's a good practice to be in. Anything is better. Anything is better than sketch 1. Circles. That works for me. Or, this is going to be the outer wall. Eventually, that will be the outer wall of our tower. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. All right. So now let's make the spiral bit. I think we're going to need to make the spiral bit of our dice tower, and then make the rest of the stuff around it. I just wanted to make a sketch so we weren't starting by making a spiral, because making a spiral isn't necessarily the most beginner-friendly thing when it's the first time you use Fusion 360. So to make our spiral, if we click on the Create menu, there is an option called Coil. The Coil tool is kind of an interesting tool. So there are most of the tools here you have to have a sketch before you make the tools. So this kind of top section of it here is stuff you do with a sketch, with the exception of these two. I guess this section here is just stuff you do when you have a two-dimensional sketch. These two items are things you do to a three-dimensional object, so you put a hole around it or you thread that hole. These things here are just, you make a three-dimensional object without any sketches that existed before it. So if we click on this coil option, what it would like us to do is to select a plane or planar face, just like when we're making a sketch. Now, I am going to click on the same plane, or I can actually click on the sketch, and that will suffice as a plane or planar face. So if I click on the sketch, and now now the next thing it wants me to do is to specify a center point. We want our coil center point to be the same center point as our outer walls, as those circles there. So I'm going to click a second time. And now again, click and move, not a click and drag. So I clicked and I let go. Now I'm specifying a diameter. And I'm going to type in the same diameter that we used for our walls. So 4 inches. And if I click to place that measurement, then a coil springs to life here. So now there's a whole bunch of tools or little widgets that our coil controls here.
Mine shows as circular, not square.
Yeah, mine is.
That is probably a thing. So yours probably looks like that.
Yes.
Cool.
Figure it out.
So, the first thing to note is height of our coil. So all these widgets here also correspond to one of these dialog boxes over here. So this dialog box here is my height. So if I happen to know how tall I want to make my dice tower, like 6 inches seems like a interesting height for a dice tower. I suppose the real key is the space between the coils. We want to make sure that a dice has enough space to roll around in there. I can, sorry, yeah.
I feel like you want to lose like one of the spirals.
I think that's going to be our next step here.
Down to 2.
Yeah, we can change our revolutions here. We can change that down to 2 if we roll around twice.
That looks safe.
And that'll be a phenomenally adequate amount of tumbling that our dice does in the inside of there. Like I said, you can change your height, you can change your diameter, you can change the angle. I'm not sure what that refers to, actually. Oh! Huh. We could make a really
Taper.
weird dice tower.
That looks like it tapers down or tapers inner.
Yeah. Or you could have, I bet if we make this a negative number, and we make it bigger, yeah. So if we make it a negative number, it tapers in. You could have a dice mountain. Okay. We're not making a dice mountain, though. We're making a dice tower. Who would roll their dice in a mountain? Only the Lord of Darkness, Sauron himself, would roll his dice in a mountain. Okay, so tower is straight up and down, so we're going to leave that. We're going to leave that alone. We're going to change our section from circle to square. And then I'm going to change my section size. So that is the thickness, basically, that little bit is. I'm going to change that to 0.25 inches. So 1/4 of an inch. Now, that has made a very small spiral. Not enough to hold a die. But if we click on OK, we can thicken that up in the next step here. The next step is we need to make our spiral wide enough that it will hold a die. So this surface here is not wide enough to hold a die. But I happen to know in the Modify menu there is an option called Press Pull. I don't use press or pull a whole lot. Press pull kind of works like extrude does. So an extrude only works on a flat surface. It's got to be like a flat surface. You can only extrude a flat surface. A press pull will work on lots of different surfaces. So if it's got curve, you can kind of extrude it outward or inward using this press pull option. And that is the method that we're going to use if we highlight the inside of our helix, and I take that little arrow and I drag it inwards. I dragged mine in 1.5 inches. Now this will probably get to a stage where it'll swear at you. Oh, it doesn't. Look at that. It just makes a
Very
weird
wide.
shape.
And that's because you went 4 inches for your diameter.
Yeah. I thought for sure that we'd get to an area where Fusion would just say, nope, I don't know how to compute that. But it gets to an area where it actually just combines it together. And that's actually kind of exactly what we want to do. We want to mash it right up into the middle there. That'll save us a step later. I thought we were going to have to draw a cylinder down the middle of that. So now let me kind of come take a walk around and see. Yeah, cool. How'd you do? Cool. Sweet spiral. Nice. Very nice. Very premium. All right. So we've got our spiral. I'm going to go ahead and click OK.
Where did you click OK?
So I clicked on OK in the dialog box. That was my spiral creation thing. You just have to click on OK and it'll finish that. Or you must have clicked Enter.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you're good to go. Yeah. All right. So now let's make the outside of our dice tower here. So from the Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and find the Extrude option. I'm going to choose that little ring down here as the thing I want to extrude. And I'm going to extrude it straight up. Now, you will notice, oh, hey, look at that. I unselected a thing. I could type in a number here too. I could type in 6 inches if we know we wanted to make it 6 inches tall. Or our spiral was 6 inches tall. Yeah, so that's fine. So you will notice that my extrusion is red. And that is because the cylinder that I'm making is intersecting with another body. So if I move this down, we can see that the way that spiral command worked, it looks like it was making it's making it a little bit bigger than 4 inches. So you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm cutting into this body. I'm removing part of the body that already existed. And that is because when you're extruding something that is intersecting with another object, the operation down here in our extrude menu, the operation defaults to cut. The first time we made a body, there was only one option to do. It was new body. But there are other options that you could choose here. So you could use this extrusion to cut away from this spiral if we wanted to. We actually want to join those items together. So I'm going to change that operation from cut to join. And I went up 6 inches tall. And now I'm just going to click on OK there and join those objects together. All right, so we've got a body in our bodies folder. Just like we named our sketches, I'm going to make sure I name my body too. This is going to be our dice tower. I think there will literally be only one body in our drawing today, but it's probably just good practice. To name something, you click on it, pause, and then click on it a second time. And you can then change the name to anything that you would like to, within the guidelines and standards of naming things that you choose in your own house. You can put as many 4-letter expletives in there as you want to. I'm not the FCC. I will not judge you. All right. So our dice tower, supposedly, I guess that's the top. You could put dice up there. Let's focus on the bottom for now. So we need our dice to stop and then roll out of the cylinder. And the way that I'm going to tackle that, I think let's first start by closing off the bottom of our tower. So if I use my navigation cube so I can kind of see the bottom of my tower, now your bottom of your tower may look like this. And we can't, our sketch has kind of turned itself off. So we want to use that same sketch to extrude out the bottom of our tower. So if you can't see your sketch, you may need to turn it back on. One of the defaults in Fusion 360 is once you've extruded something from a sketch, it automatically hides that sketch. So if you need to turn that sketch back on, you certainly can do that. And now that we turn it back on, I can use from my Create menu the Extrude option one more time. Actually, let's think about this. If I close it off, I'm no longer going to be able to see inside of my object. And I think I want to use what I can see inside of my object to draw the opening. Yeah. So instead of closing off the bottom right now, let's make the opening. As the instructor of this class, I reserve the right to change my mind wildly at any time. So here I can see this flat surface, this flat face, and it looks to me like this would point straight out the side of it. Yeah, it looks to me like it does. Now, and at first when we drew a sketch, we drew them on these imaginary surfaces here. But I can draw a sketch on any flat surface. So any flat surface, I can say, hey, let me make a sketch based on wherever that flat surface is in space here. So from my Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose Create Sketch. And then I'm going to click on that flat surface that was kind of the bottom of my spiral as the plane or planaire face I want to create my sketch on. And now, I bet if I go ahead and grab my center diameter circle tool, actually, let's go ahead and grab the center or the 2-point rectangle tool. Let's make a rectangular opening in this thing. So I'm going to grab my 2-point rectangle tool. I'm going to I can click on this edge here, and I can draw a line that comes straight up. Now I know that I'm right over the middle here because it's giving me this little blue dashed line.
So where did you click to start with? I'm sorry.
I clicked way over on the side here.
All right.
Now, you could also click right here in the middle. That's also a fine way to do it. So whichever way you started with, it'll let you draw a rectangle, and I suppose it doesn't need to go all the way over. In fact, it doesn't even need to be centered, honestly. Your rectangle could really be anywhere in here, and I'm sure the dice will come spilling right out of there without issue. So my rectangle is going to be 1.5 inches. That seems like a fine opening for a dice tower, and it's going to be 2 inches tall. Is that enough room for dice? 1.5 inches, yeah, by 2. That's probably enough room for dice. Unless you got like a whole bunch of those 20-sided dice in there. I don't know how you roll, how your dice game is on. All right, so I made a rectangle. I think I'm going to be done with it. I think I'm going to go ahead and click on the finish sketch icon here. Now we can extrude out this rectangle. So if I click on the extrude option and I highlight my rectangle underneath there.
Sorry,
Now, yeah.
I got screwed up with the tool, so I'm still trying to draw a rectangle. I don't have the dimensions.
Yeah.
Like this.
And then we'll click on that face. So you'll create a sketch. There you go. And now you can grab your rectangle tool.
And then where do we start? With it?
Yeah, like down here on this
Okay.
line somewhere. Yeah, anywhere down there is good. And then you'll want to go up. Like I went up a couple inches. I went up 2 inches. To bounce back and forth between the two measurements, you can hit the tab key.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What was your bottom width of it?
No, is there some, I'm sorry.
My width was 1.5 inches.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there some, did I do something wrong that my rectangle looks like this?
No. So you may just have to
Change the view a little?
yeah, change your view so you can look kind of straight up at it, and just highlight that one little bit that's missed there. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
And when we extrude this out, once we get to the point of the extrusion where we're intersecting with another object, then you can see it turns red, and this time that is indeed what we want, because we want to cut away that square opening right there.
Wait a minute, profiles 2 selected?
Now that could be. So I have 2 profiles selected. When we created our sketch on that face that already existed, when we created our sketch down here, because it was on an existing face, it kind of had some built-in geometry for us.
Oh.
So this face here has kind of like lines that are the edge of it. So we got some built-in lines, and because of that, I have a line that goes through the middle of my sketch here. So here, if I look at it straight on, you can see that this is a part of it, and then this is my rectangle, part of my rectangle that I drew. So because the rectangle I drew was in the middle of this face, it kind of divided up that face, and there were multiple selections that I had to make in order to make my rectangle.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I see. My sketch ended up in a different spot.
That's probably fine.
Okay.
You're probably totally fine.
Question also, like for instance, if you have a rectangle like that with the extrude tool,
Mm-hmm.
could one do an angle?
So
Can you
not
extrude it on an
really.
angle?
Actually, yes, you can. There is this little widget right here, and I can twiddle this little widget. Yeah, and you could totally extrude things out. Actually, that is a taper.
It's called a taper.
Yeah, so that is a taper. So that is making it gradually smaller. So there's not really a way to extrude out at an angle.
Isn't.
If you want to take a shape and move it out at an angle, you actually don't want to do an extrusion, you want to do a sweep. So you have to, you'll define a path to go along before you
And
make
can
that
it be
extrusion.
not a curve, but a
Yep,
linear?
it could be a straight line for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that was my main question when I was looking at that, I'm like,
Mhm.
trying to.
Or could you just, make a face that is at an angle to the z-axis and then extrude that?
Yeah, that would,
And
yeah.
then you call that tool that I was mentioning, not an extrude, something else,
A
right?
sweep.
A sweep.
Yeah, sweep. That would probably be how I would think about that. Yeah. All right, so we've extruded out our little cutaway bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and click on OK. You guys got holes in the bottom of your dice tower? Yeah. So I'd like to have some walls on the inside of this tower here, because when our dice come tumbling out, I don't want them to fall back in there. I want them to come straight out this opening. So what I
Now-
think, yeah.
Your opening is flat on the bottom, mine's got an arc. Sorry.
Twirl your view. I'm not sure why yours has an arc. It must be something with yeah, that's weird. I don't know why your curve has an arc, but it'll be okay.
Pretty weak we have.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be okay. Yeah. All right, so I mentioned before that we could go back in time in our timeline and we could make an edit. So down here is our timeline at the bottom. Our sketch that we made that I totally renamed already because that's the best practice to do. Sketch 3. I'm going to go ahead and I already called it my opening because I was totally on top of things. So this opening sketch here, if I right click on it, I can go back in time and I can edit that sketch. If I do so, you'll see now we no longer have an actual opening because I have gone back in time in my timeline. It's kind of grayed out. And now I'm back in time at the place where I was making that sketch. And what I would like to do is I would like to use that offset tool. The same way I made the walls of the exterior of my dice tower here by clicking on Modify and then Offset. I can take that rectangle I made and I can expand it out. I'm going to do that same 1/8 of an inch for good measure. And I'm going to hit enter. And then the last thing that I'm going to do here, because we were talking about wanting to 3D print this. I really only need a wall on the inside of my tower. I don't really need this wall on the top. And when we go to print this thing, like a top wall like this wouldn't print very well. So what I'm going to do is, from my Create menu, I'm going to go ahead and grab the Line tool. And I'm just going to close off the box at the top here. So now the only part that I need to extrude is just this line here. If that makes sense.
Sorry, I totally missed this step altogether. I was trying to catch up.
That's all right, yeah.
And how is spacing out too?
No worries. So yeah, we're going back in time. Look at the underneath of your object there. And you know, maybe a better way to do this, because we don't need that whole thing, and because you guys missed that step anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my, from my create menu, I'm gonna grab this, the 2-point rectangle tool again. So I'll click on create, and then 2-point rectangle,
Okay,
and then we'll draw a small rectangle.
Which part?
So if you right click on that exit and then say edit sketch.
Got it.
And now whichever side is like the inside of your sketch there from the create menu. Yeah, so from the create menu, you can go ahead and choose rectangle and then 2-point rectangle. And then I'm just gonna draw a rectangle. So you're probably looking at your sketch
What was
like
the
this.
offset thing you were doing? I missed that.
Well, the offset, I changed my mind and I
Okay.
decided we don't need to do an offset because it makes a whole bunch of geometry that we don't need.
Okay.
We just need to make a 2-point rectangle that is right next to our other rectangle. And I'm going to make this come all the way to the inside, to the middle of my axis here.
I am stuck in 3D land and I don't know how to get out.
all right, so, well,
a good
go
thing
ahead
to
and
be.
take care of him first.
Chris,
Yeah.
nice to meet you.
So, so if you right click on your opening sketch
Yes.
and then say edit sketch. So now we're going back in time to where we made that sketch.
Okay.
And now you can grab from your create menu the
Gotcha.
2-point rectangle tool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did that.
Yeah, and then you want to draw that rectangle next to it up there. There you go, perfect.
You said something about centering it. I think I drew it in the wrong location. It's already centered.
Oh, well that's fine. So you draw it just off to the side there then.
Off here.
Yeah, the other way. And then straight down. There you go. And just make it like 1/8 of an inch wide.
Got it.
And
So-
finish sketch?
Yeah, and then we can finish our sketch.
I was right.
Ah, cool. We're running just a couple minutes behind. Is that all right?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, cool. So we've got our rectangles on the inside. Cool. So now we can extrude now, and you'll notice when I said finish sketch, I came back into the present, right? So this icon that was grayed out down here when we went back and edited this sketch, it's the same thing. Now we've come back into the present, and we've got our new sketch geometry that got drawn in there. And now we can extrude that sketch geometry. So from the create menu here, I'm going to go ahead and choose the extrude option. I am going to pick the geometry that I need there. And now I'll show you yet one more feature here in the extrude dialog window. So normally we would extrude something and it's flat on the end, right? But that's kind of boring because what I'd really like to do is I'd like to join it.
Okay, every time I try to extrude, I get a big circle.
Oh.
And I'm also, my textures are solid.
So, yeah, click cancel. There you go. Now click create. Ah, here's what I see. Your outer wall sketch. If you turn that off, so your outer wall sketch was kind of like between the camera and the sketch that you wanted to click on. So it wasn't gonna let you click on it because there was something in between you.
I feel like I must have missed a part of it.
Oh no, you're good. Yep. There you go. Perfect.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Select this, you said?
Yeah, exactly. And then you'll also want the little bit underneath it, the little square bit. There you go. And now I'm extruding it out. Now, normally I would just extrude it out and I would specify, oh boy, I would specify a distance. In this case, what I really would like it to do is I'd like to extrude out and meet up with this wall. And there is an option here in our extrude dialog box.
I think I know why mine's curved.
Oh, yeah.
Because I extruded the wrong way.
Oh.
Because now my wall will go straight back.
So, click cancel.
Oh, that's an
We can
interesting
fix
one.
that. So this is probably the extrude, or that first, is that the extrude? No, it's this one right here. Yeah, so if you right click on that
Oh, right click.
and say edit feature, and now you could change that to a positive number. There we go. Cool.
Alright.
All
No
right.
longer curved.
All right. So instead of specifying a distance here, I'm going to say the extent type is to an object. And then I'm going to rotate my view around, and I'm going to click on this wall here, and it's going to extrude it right out to that wall. Now, it's kind of hard to see what's going on because things get highlighted in weird blue ways, but if I say OK, and I'm going to turn off my sketch so it's easy to see. Now you can see we've got a nice little interior wall there.
Oh, we're joining, right?
We are joining.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. We got a little interior wall. Little interior wall. Interior wall. Sweet. All right. Now the last.
I
Yeah.
had a question too, with all the choices of shapes in the browser box on the left,
Yeah.
can you either cement two of those shapes together or cut into any of those shapes?
Definitely. So
Yeah.
you can join two shapes together.
So it's called joining.
It's actually called the combine tool.
Combine tool.
Yeah, you can combine two shapes together.
Combine tool.
And the combine tool is in the modify menu here. So modify, and then the combine tool is right there.
And what about cutting into an existing shape? Like
Yeah.
cutting a chunk out of it, you can do that?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been doing with the extrude tool, right?
Yeah.
Is extruding
Kind
into
of like
another
baking in
shape.
various things, since mine isn't on. So.
Yeah. All right, so the last thing we're going to do here before, and then we'll be done, is to make the bottom of our dice tower. To make the bottom of my dice tower, I'm just going to close up the bottom. And I can do that with the very first sketch we made. I called it outer wall. And if I turn it back on, I can turn the visibility of the sketch back on. And from the create menu, I can just grab the extrude tool one last time. And I can extrude out or extrude downward. So I'm going to extrude down. I'm going to make it 1/4 of an inch thick. 0.25. And now for me, for some reason, I need to go negative. And again, I'm gonna make this a join and not a cut.
Sorry, I didn't see which face you selected.
I selected all of the faces that made up our very first sketch, the sketch we made that was 2 circles.
Alright.
So I'm going to select both that inner circle and the outer ring there. And we're kind of making the bottom of our tower here. I'm making this a join, and I'm just going to say OK. So there we go. We got ourselves a dice tower. Now you can make the opening in the top. You can make an opening in the top the same way that we made our opening in the bottom. We won't do that in this class
No,
because
that
we're
will
kind of
actually fill in the entire bottom and not just the ring.
correct. Yeah, that filled in our whole. We wanted to fill in our whole bottom.
If you pick both of those.
Assuming you pick both of the things. Yeah.
Okay, then I go back and I guess I'll
We're here at that very last extrusion that you made,
edit.
and then say edit feature.
Demonstrate different things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
just
just need to.
different
There we go.
projects.
Perfect.
All right. That's-
There we go.
In the past, sometimes he had a long form project.
Cool.
that took multiple consecutive weeks, but since I started coming, it's like one day, one project, and it's good. Typically,
Yeah.
we find different tools.
Cool.
Now, if you want to take this further and make your dice tower cooler, let me give you some keywords that you could type into a Google search to do some searching on. The outside of this, when I've seen dice towers, they've got like brick textures on them or whatever
like
kind of
this.
textures. I would look up using the emboss tool. So Fusion 360 has an emboss tool here, so you could emboss like a texture, a brick texture on the outside, tiles, or even like little stones or whatever. You could
Or
emboss
any kind
those
of pattern
tiles.
you want.
Any kind of pattern you'd want to, for sure. The emboss tool is a great tool for that. And then as far as making, if you wanted to make like a little opening or a balcony or something like that, you can use those same kind of extrude tools. The same method that we made to make our opening. You can make another opening up top. I'm around at the space. So, if you see me around and you're like, hey, I wanted to make our dice tower even cooler and I got stuck. Usually I have my laptop with me and we can just break out Fusion 360 and you can ask me questions. I'm always at Model Monday a little early. So if you want to come a little early and you have questions, I'm here for that for sure. All right. This is fun. We've never made a dice tower before. So thank you for the suggestion.
All right. You're welcome.
And I will see you next week.